December 20th, 1943. 27,000 feet above Bremen, Germany. Oberleutnant Franz Stigler of Jägerschwader, 27, climbed toward what should have been his fifth kill of the day. One more victory, and he'd earned the Knight's Cross, Germany's highest military honor. The calculation was simple. 5 kills equaled glory, promotion, and a 2-week leave to see his family. Through his gun sight, he watched a lone B-17 bomber struggling to stay airborne. The American fortress was barely flying. One engine completely gone. Another trailing smoke. Tail section shredded. No escort fighters in sight. It was the easiest kill Stigler would ever get. His squadron mates had mocked these American bombers for months. Flying coffins, they called them. Fat targets that burned beautifully. Major Klaus Bretschneider had laughed just last week when intelligence reported the Americans were still sending unescorted bombers deep into Germany. They might as well paint targets on their fuselages, he'd said. Make our job easier. But as Stigler closed the 200 yards and looked through his canopy at the crippled bomber, he saw something that would haunt him for the next 50 years. Faces. American faces. Young men bleeding, dying, trying desperately to keep their aircraft flying. And in that moment, Franz Stigler had to make a choice that would cost him everything. This is the story of what happened when a German fighter ace had the perfect kill in his sights and chose mercy instead. It's about a decision that violated every order he'd been given, a decision that could have gotten him executed, and a decision that took 50 years to understand. Franz Stigler was not a Nazi. This distinction mattered, though few outside Germany understood it. He was a Luftwaffe fighter pilot, a professional, a man who had joined the military in 1935 because he loved flying, not because he loved Hitler. Born in Regensburg in 1915, Stigler had grown up watching biplanes barnstorm across Bavarian skies. His father owned a small manufacturing business. Middle class, Catholic, traditional Bavarian values, honor, duty, family. When Stigler joined the Luftwaffe, his commanding officer was Hauptmann Gustav Rodel, a decorated veteran of the Spanish Civil War. Rodel taught his young pilots more than just tactics. He taught them a code. You are fighter pilots first, soldier second and Germans third. Rodel would say during briefings, you will fight with honor. You will respect your enemy. And you will never, under any circumstances, shoot a man in a parachute. Stigler remembered the day Rodel had made this code brutally clear. A young pilot named Werner had strafed British pilots descending in parachutes over the channel. Rodel called the entire squadron together. I want you all to hear this, Rodel said, his voice cold. If I ever hear of any of you shooting at a man in a parachute, I will shoot you myself. The message was received. By December 1943, Stigler had flown over 400 combat missions. He'd been shot down twice, wounded once. He'd watched friends burn alive in their cockpits. He'd seen formations of German bombers torn apart by British fighters. War had taught him that survival required skill, luck, and a willingness to kill before being killed. He'd scored 22 confirmed victories. Most were against British Spitfires and American fighters. He'd never killed a bomber crew before. Fighters were one thing, combatants who could fight back. But bomber crews were different. Sitting ducks and lumbering, heavily armed fortresses that burned when you hit them right. Their legitimate targets, another pilot, Lieutenant Hans Meyer, had said over drinks the night before. They're bombing our cities, killing German civilians. You put them down fast, you save German lives. Simple mathematics. The mathematics of war. Franz Stigler understood those equations. Enemy bombers destroyed equal German cities saved. 5 kills equal the Knight's Cross. The Knight's Cross equals survival, because decorated pilots got rotated to training commands away from the meat grinder of daily combat. December 20th, 1943 started like most winter days over Germany. Cold, gray, bomber streams inbound from England targeting Bremen's industrial districts. Stigler had scrambled at 1,130 hours. His Messerschmitt Bf-109G 6 carried enough ammunition for about 60 seconds of sustained fire. 2 13mm machine guns in the nose. One 20mm cannon firing through the propeller hub. Against the armor and redundancy of a B-17, you needed to hit critical areas: cockpit, engines, fuel tanks. He'd already shot down 2 American fighters that morning. P-47 Thunderbolts escorting the bomber stream. Both had been good fights, skilled pilots. But Stigler was better, or luckier. In aerial combat, it was often impossible to tell the difference. After the second kill, his fuel was running low. Time to head home, refuel, rearm, and return for the afternoon sorties. But then he spotted it. A lone B-17, separated from his formation, losing altitude, clearly crippled. Stigler checked his fuel gauge. Enough for one more engagement and a straight flight home. He checked his ammunition. 60 rounds of 20 millimeters, 200 rounds of 13 millimeters. More than enough to destroy a crippled bomber. He advanced throttle and began his climb. The B-17 was named Ye Old Pub. Second Lieutenant Charlie Brown was the pilot, 21 years old, from Weston, West Virginia. This was his first mission as aircraft commander. It would nearly be his last. The mission had gone wrong from the beginning. The target was Bremen, a heavily defended industrial city. German fighters had swarmed the formation. Flak had filled the sky with black bursts of shrapnel. Ye Old Pub had been hit repeatedly. The No. 2 engine was completely gone, torn from its mounting by a direct flak hit. No. 4 was running rough, losing oil pressure. The tail section looked like it had been chewed by a giant dog. Fabric torn, metal twisted. The tail gunner, Sergeant Hugh Eckenrode, was dead, slumped his position, blood freezing on the shattered turret glass. Inside the aircraft, it was chaos. Sergeant Andy Rasmussen, the bald turret gunner, was wounded, unconscious. The navigator, Second Lieutenant Al Sadek, had taken shrapnel in his shoulder. The radio operator was trying to stop the bleeding. The waist gunners were firing at nothing, burning ammunition at shadows, their nerves shattered. Charlie Brown himself had been hit. A shell fragment had grazed his head, not enough to kill but enough to blur his vision and fill his mouth with blood. His co-pilot, Second Lieutenant Spencer Pinky Luke, was barely conscious, wounded in the leg. Brown's left hand gripped the control yoke with white-knuckled intensity. His right hand worked the throttles, coaxing every remaining ounce of power from the dying engines. The B-17 was designed to absorb punishment. Its nickname, Flying Fortress, came from its ability to take hits that would destroy any other aircraft. But there were limits. "We're not going to make it," Luke muttered through clenched teeth. "Charlie, we're not going to make it to England." Brown didn't answer. He was trying to calculate. Altitude, 8,000 feet and dropping. Distance to English coast, 250 miles. Rate of descent, 500 feet per minute. The mathematics were brutal. They'd be in the North Sea long before they reached safety. "Get ready to bail out," Brown said. "When we hit 3,000 feet, everyone goes. I'll hold her steady as long as I can." It was at that moment Franz Stigler pulled alongside. Stigler had approached from the bomber's blind spot, below and behind. Standard fighter tactics. Come in fast, hit the engines, break away before the gunners could track you. But as he closed the 200 yards, climbing to line up his shot, he saw through the massive holes in the B-17's fuselage, saw the crew inside, saw them moving, trying to save their aircraft, trying to survive. The tail gunner wasn't moving, dead or unconscious. The ball turret guns hung limp, also out of action. The waist guns were pointed in random directions, not tracking him. Stigler moved closer, 100 yards, close enough to see individual faces. A young gunner, maybe 19 years old, looked directly at him through a hole in the fuselage. Their eyes met. The American didn't even try to aim his weapon. He just stared, waiting to die. Stigler's hand was on the trigger. 2 seconds of fire would finish this. The B-17 would explode or break apart or catch fire. 5 kills. The Knight's Cross. 2 weeks with his family. But he couldn't pull the trigger. Gustav Rodel's voice echoed in his mind. "If I see any of you shoot at a parachute, I'll shoot you myself." Stigler had asked Rodel once what he meant by that. A man in a parachute can't fight back, Rodell had explained. He's defenseless. Shooting him isn't combat. It's murder. Stigler looked at the crippled B-17, at the faces visible through the torn metal, at the dead gunner frozen in his turret. This isn't a combat aircraft anymore, Stigler thought. This is a parachute, a flying parachute. These men are already out of fight. He made his decision. Stigler pulled alongside the B-17's left wing. Close. Maybe 20 feet separation. He could see Charlie Brown in the cockpit, blood streaming down his face, fighting to control the damaged aircraft. Brown saw the German fighter, and his heart sank. This was it. The end. The fighter was too close to miss. But the German pilot wasn't shooting. He was flying formation, pointing, gesturing toward the north, toward the coast. What Stigler was trying to communicate was simple. Fly north. Stay low. Get over the North Sea. Go home. But he was also doing something else. He was escorting them for the next 15 minutes. Franz Stigler flew as a B-17's protector. When German flak batteries on the ground saw the crippled American bomber, they prepared to fire. But they saw the Bf-109 flying formation with it and held fire. They assumed the German pilot was shepherding the bomber toward an airfield for capture. When they crossed the coast, heading over the North Sea, Stigler moved even closer. He could see the American pilot more clearly now. Young, terrified, determined, keeping his dying aircraft in the air through sheer will. Stigler had violated every protocol. He'd failed to destroy an enemy aircraft he could have easily killed. He was escorting the enemy to safety. If any German pilot saw this, if it was reported, he would face a court-martial. Execution by firing squad was a standard punishment for aiding the enemy, but he couldn't turn back. Years later, in a 1990 interview, Stigler would try to explain what he felt that day. I could not kill them, he said. I just could not. It would have been the same as shooting a man hanging from a parachute. These boys were already hanging from a parachute. The whole airplane was a parachute. When they were 10 miles over the North Sea, far enough that the flak batteries couldn't reach them, Stigler made eye contact with Charlie Brown one last time. He raised his hand, a salute. Then he rolled his Bf-109 into a banking turn and headed back toward Germany. Charlie Brown watched the German fighter disappear into the winter haze. He didn't understand what had just happened. He didn't know why the German pilot had spared them. Did that just happen? Luke asked, his voice weak. Did a German fighter just escort us out? Yeah, Brown said. Yeah, it did. The B-17 made it back to England. Barely. Brown crash-landed at Seething, the first base he could reach. The aircraft was declared beyond repair. The ground crew counted over 20 major damage areas. Any one of them should have been fatal. Charlie Brown and his surviving crew were debriefed by intelligence officers. When Brown mentioned a German pilot who had escorted them to safety, the officers told him to never speak of it again. If word gets out that you fraternize with the enemy, if that story spreads, it's bad for morale, the intelligence officer said. The Germans are the enemy. They're murderers. They're Nazis. They don't do honorable things. Understood. Brown understood. He locked the story away for 50 years. Franz Stigler landed at his base 30 minutes later. He'd used every drop of fuel. The ground crew asked about his mission. No contact, Stigler lied. Engine trouble. Had to return early. He filed a false report. No engagement. No sighting. Technical difficulties with his aircraft. If anyone had seen him escorting the American bomber, he would have been arrested immediately. The penalty for aiding the enemy was death. Even decorated pilots were not exempt. But no one had seen. Or if they had, they didn't report it. Stigler never claimed the B-17 as a kill. Never mentioned the encounter to his squadron mates. That day, December 20th, 1943, he had the easiest kill of his career in his sights and walked away from it. He would end the war with 28 confirmed victories, enough to be considered an ace, not enough for the Knight's Cross. He would always be one kill short. After the war, Stigler emigrated to Canada. He became a businessman, married, had children, built a quiet life far from the skies over Germany where he'd fought and killed, and made one decision that violated everything he'd been ordered to do. But that decision haunted him. In 1986, Stigler's wife noticed he'd been unusually quiet for weeks. "What's wrong?" she asked. "I've been thinking about something that happened in the war," Stigler said. "Something I've never told anyone." He told her about the B-17, about the young American pilot, about escorting the enemy to safety while his own country's flak batteries held fire because they thought he was capturing the aircraft. "Do you ever wonder they made it?" his wife asked. "Every day," Stigler said. "Every single day." In 1990, Charlie Brown was 68 years old, retired, living in Florida. He'd never spoken publicly about the German pilot who had saved his life. The Air Force had told him to keep quiet, and he had. But at 68, facing his own mortality, Brown decided the story needed to be told. He wrote a letter to a Combat Pilot Association newsletter. He described the encounter. The crippled B-17, the German pilot who should have killed them but didn't. "I'm trying to find this man," Brown wrote. "I don't know his name. I don't know if he survived the war. But if he did, I need to thank him. He saved my life and the lives of my crew. I need him to know that we made it home because of him." The letter was published in January 1990. Franz Stigler's daughter saw it in a military history magazine that had reprinted Brown's letter. She read it to her father. "Papa," she said, "I think this is about you." Stigler read the letter. The date matched. December 20th, 1943. The location matched. Bremen. The description of the damaged B-17 matched what he remembered. Stigler was 75 years old, living in Canada. He'd kept a secret for 47 years. And now, the man he'd saved was looking for him. Stigler wrote a letter to Charlie Brown. "Dear Charles," it began, "I was the pilot of the Messerschmitt Bf 109 that flew alongside your B-17 on December 20th, 1943. I have waited 47 years to tell you. I could not shoot. You were already destroyed. Shooting you would have been murder. I am glad you made it home." When Charlie Brown received the letter, he cried. His wife found him sitting at the kitchen table, the letter in his hands, tears streaming down his face. They met in person in 1990. Two old men, one American, one German, both in their mid-70s, both carrying 47 years of wondering. They embraced at the airport like brothers. "Why?" Brown asked. "Why did you let us live?" Stigler thought about the question. He'd asked himself the same thing thousands of times. "My commander once told me," Stigler said, "that if he ever caught me shooting at a man in a parachute, he would shoot me himself. When I saw your aircraft, I saw men already hanging from a parachute. The whole airplane was a parachute. I could not shoot." Brown understood. "You risked your life for us. If anyone had seen you, they would have shot me," Stigler finished. "Yes, but I could not do otherwise. You were no longer warriors. You were just young men trying to survive. Like me." The two men remained close friends until their deaths. Stigler died in 2008. Brown died just a few months later. They are buried near each other. Their story became a book, A Higher Call, written by Adam Makos. It documents not just the encounter, but the 47-year silence and the remarkable reunion. "He's alive," Brown said. "After all these years, he's alive." Franz Stigler's decision on December 20th, 1943 cost him the Knight's Cross. It cost him recognition as one of Germany's top aces. It could have cost him his life, but it gave him something more valuable. It gave him the knowledge that in the middle of the worst war in human history, in the middle of a brutal aerial campaign where hundreds of young men died every day, he had chosen mercy over murder. People ask me if I regret it. Stigler said in a 1995 interview, 5 years after reuniting with Brown, "Do I regret not killing Charlie Brown and his crew? Do I regret missing my chance at the Knight's Cross?" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I look at it this way. I ended the war with 28 kills. I could have had 29, plus 9 more from that bomber crew. But instead, I have something better. I have the friendship of the man whose life I spared. I have the knowledge that 8 young Americans went home to their families because I couldn't pull the trigger, and I can look at myself in the mirror. The story of Franz Stigler and Charlie Brown reminds us that even in war, even when surrounded by death and destruction, individual choices matter. One German pilot, on one winter day, chose humanity over orders, chose mercy over victory. He paid for that choice with decades of silence and the loss of military honor. But he gained something far more valuable. He kept his soul. If this story moved you, hit that like button. Subscribe for more untold stories of courage and moral complexity from World War II. Drop a comment. Tell us, what would you have done in Stigler's position? Would you have taken the kill? Or would you have risked everything to spare an enemy who couldn't fight back? These stories matter. These choices matter. And remembering them matters. Franz Stigler proved that sometimes the most courageous thing a soldier can do is refuse to kill, even when orders, training, and survival instincts scream otherwise. Thank you for watching, and thank you for keeping these stories alive.